Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's get into the review. The review of this packet's number, again, Sefer 17, Volume 17 of the Tzurba Rabbanan, and it's the Lax Family Edition, the Peretz Family Volume, and this year is sponsored by Lauren and Michael Mandelstam and family in honor of their brothers, Rabbi Rafi Mandelstam, Rabbi Yoni Mandelstam, for all of the Torah they teach to their Talmidim in TABC and the Teaneck and Fairlawn communities, and in honor of myself for the Torah that we spread. May our learning be a schus for our Chayalim and all of Klal Yisrael. So, B'ez Hashem, through the Torah that we learned, we should be zocha to Yeshuos and Refuos and Geulos. So we finished volume 17 last time, so as we will try to have two Chazara shiurim, where we will not go over everything that we learned the first few times in depth, but just highlights, so those who listen could just remember and jar some memories as we will do. So the first year we'll discuss the sugyas that were left regarding Kiddush and Oneg Shabbos and Shalashudis. And next year we'll get into Havdalah, the two shiurim of Havdalah, and then the Hakdama to Shabbos and the beginning of Bishul. So here we go. So first we spoke about details of Kiddush, which we spoke about in the earlier volume also. Hearing Kiddush from others. Can one hear Kiddush from others? So yes, one can. There's a principle of Shomea Ka'oneh, that somebody else could say it. They are my mouthpiece, and I could hear it. There's a big sugya in Lumdis. How does Shomea Ka'oneh work? Is it mamish, like I'm saying it, or they're saying it? I'm being yotzei with their saying it. Discussion of the Chazon Ish and others, the Beis Halevi, but one could be Yosei Kiddush, hearing it, and that's what if you look on page 21, we're back in the Tzurba Rabbanan volume 17, page 21. They're chazering the shiurim. So one could be Yotze with hearing someone else, even if someone else has a different language and miftah and pronunciation. That's okay. One could be Yotzei Kiddush. One might add, even if one says a few different words, because one's Sephardi and Ashkenazi, a couple different words, one is still going to be Yotzei, right? We know the Maggid Avram quotes the Arizal that there are 12 gates in Shamayim, and one for every Shevet, and one for every Nusach, and it's okay. That would work. The only time Shomei Ka'oneh would not work is if somebody is not mechuyev. Right? We learned in the Yantav Sheni Kel Chasa, if an Israeli wants to make Kiddush for a Ben Chutz La'aretz on the second day of Yantav, that doesn't work. An Israeli is Ben Eretz Yisrael is not mechuyev, and he wouldn't be able to be motzi the other in Kiddush. Could somebody who is a Machal Shabbos be motzi someone in Kiddush? Should the Shuvas Or Latzion or B'tzion Abishol says no, unless if the person has somewhat of busha, right? He's embarrassed to not to be desecrate Shabbos in front of a great person. So then maybe that's already not considered a Machal Shabbos b'far Hesya. If he has some type of busha, and it might relate to the Bizman Hazeh. If somebody itself, the Malamed says, if somebody has some respect for Shabbos and he wants to make Kiddush, so then doesn't that show that there's something there? There's the Pintaliyah that's coming out, and then it would be permissible. We spoke about a case where a girl is becoming frum and lives with her parents. It'll be very difficult, but Tzara Gadol, it would be okay. So Shomei Ka'oneh would work. What's the best time to make Kiddush? So we know when you get home from shul on Shabbos. The Torah says on page 24, Torah says in Reish Ayin Aleph, right? You have to make Kiddush right away when you get home, as soon as you can. The Torah quotes that, the Shulchan Aruch quotes that. What if somebody comes home and they're not so hungry yet? Okay, you could wait, you could be a little flexible, but again, generally one should try to eat as soon as they can. But the Mishnah Berurah does quote, if there are Shalom Bayis issues, you're not so hungry, but Shalom Bayis and the kids and the wife, there are guests, if there are aniyim there, then for sure you should make Kiddush right away, and one should not delay in that regard. We quoted from the Dvar of Ram, the Kovner Rav. It's not in the packet, but the Chavetz Chaim at one point thought that maybe there's an issue of a Bal Ta'acher. We know there's Bal Ta'acher by Tzedakah, so maybe there's Bal Ta'acher delaying a mitzvah when it comes to Hachrosas Archim, is that possible? So then they quote maybe that you should make Kiddush and give food first and only then afterwards sing Shalom Aleichem and Eishes Chayil. But we assume that Dvar Avram quotes in the footnote that, because they know, everyone knows that there's Shalom Aleichem and there's Eishes Chayil, so it's Ki'ilu Nikvazman, that the stucco wouldn't be given then and the food won't be given then until then, so therefore it wouldn't be a problem to delay a little bit while the Minhag Yisrael is fulfilled. What about making Kiddush before it's nighttime? So we spoke about that in the Tosefes Shiurim, that one can make Kiddush before it's actually, so to speak, Shabbos, if I was Makabel Shabbos. That's the Gemara Brachas Daf Chav Zayin, in source number 8. Rav used to daven on Shabbos, Soli Shel Shabbos, Be'erev Shabbos. Did he make Kedusha? And the Gemara says, yeah, V'omer Kedusha Lakos. He made Kiddush even right after he davened. Could a person be Makabel Shabbos, could make Kiddush before he davens Ma'ariv? Let's say I know it's an early Shabbos, so one wants as little kids. So you're going to be Makabel Shabbos maybe, and then make Kiddush, and then go daven Ma'ariv, and have your whole meal, but daven Ma'ariv later, after the kids go to sleep. So the Maggid Avram says that's technically okay. The Maggid Avram says, V'nir Ali, Imrotza L'Kabel Shabbos B'Bod Yom, Ula Kaddish V'Lechol, Ulispala Arvis Balayla Rashoy. One is allowed to do that. But the Mishnah Berurah quotes that Maggid Avram. The Gra is not a fan of that. The Gra did not approve, and the Ma'aser Rav is quoted that one should daven Ma'ariv first before one makes Kiddush. If one missed Kiddush somehow Friday night, one was sick, whatever the situation may be, so one can make Kiddush Shabbos day. And then Shabbos day, one would say the whole bracha of the Friday night Kiddush. Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzosav. One would not say Yom HaShishi, the first paragraph, because that's Eidos that Hashem created the world, and that's only for Friday night. But other than that, the rest of the Kiddush one would make the next day, and that would be Motzi both Kiddushes. You don't have to make two Kiddushes. The Aruch HaShulchan says in Source 13, right, and one Kiddush would be Motzi for both. Good. Kiddush Shabbos Day. Kiddush Shabbos Day, that's based on a Gemara in Maseches Pesachim Daf Kuvav. And though the Gemara seems to learn it out from a pasuk, we assume that it is a din d'Rabbanan. It is a Kiddush d'Rabbanan. Kiddush d'Oraisa is only at night. Zachar Yom Shabbos Lakacho. Kiddush during the day is Kiddush d'Rabbanan, and it's called Kiddush Rabbah. That's the Gemara Pesachim Kuvav. Biyomai Mevarech. And what is it? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda the Amora says Borei Pri Hagafen. Borei Pri Hagafen. That's the Kiddush. Rav Ashi Iklu Mechuza. The Gemara tells a story. One time Rav Ashi visited Mechuza. Amrule Likter Shlan Mar Kiddush Rabbah. They said, no, B'chavod. Could you make Kiddush for us? Havule. They gave him a cup. And he said, what's Kiddush Rabbah? He didn't know what they meant. So Savar, mine you Kiddush Rabbah. Amar, he says, you know what? Everything starts off with a Borei Pri Hagafen. So I'll start and I'll take it from there. So he made a Borei Pri Hagafen, and then he sees there's an old man that started to drink already. He's like, oh, okay, I got it. I said Borei Pri Hagafen, that's all it is. Chacham Eina Barosho. And that's what he did. And that's why is it called Kiddush Rabbah? So some Rishonim, Rashi and the Rashbam say Rabbah means it's the most common bracha around, Borei Pri Hagafen. But the Tosfos Rid and the Ran both say that it is a Lashon Sagi Nahar, right? It's a euphemism. Really, it is Kiddusha Zuta. It's the small Kiddush. All you do is Borei Pri Hagafen. That's the whole Kiddush Shabbos day. But we call it Kiddusha Rabbah. How is this a Kiddush as compared to the Friday night Kiddush? So the Rambam says, the Rambam Paskins, we pass in this way l'chadchila, that we treat it with all the halachas of the Friday night Kiddush, including not eating before Kiddush. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shabbos, in Perach Chavtes, v'asilo la'adam sheyitom klum kodem sheyikadesh. A person shouldn't eat anything before they make Kiddush. V'gam Kiddush zeh lo yeh b'makam Seudah. Makam Seudah and no eating. And the Ravid argues. The Ravid says, no, you're allowed to eat Shabbos morning before the Kiddush. This isn't the same type of Kiddush. We mentioned then that Rav Soloveitchik speaks about the lumdus. Is this just to be koveya, this Seudah with wine, or is this a Kiddush? According to the Ravid, it's to have wine, but it's not a Kiddush. Therefore, you're allowed to eat beforehand, while the Rambam seems to say it's a real Kiddush. It's a real Kiddush. We mentioned later, but I'll mention it again now. There are those that make Kiddush again when they get home from shul after a Kiddush. They have Kiddush in shul, and then they make Kiddush again. They don't start with that motzi. So why would they do that? So maybe some people weren't yotzi with Kiddush in shul. That's one reason. What if everybody was yotzi with Kiddush in shul? So then some say you should still do that because of the Vilna Gaon, which Beth Hashem will see later, who says that you're not yotzi Kiddush Makam Seudah if you don't have bread. So if you didn't have bread, you aren't yotzi Kiddush Makam Seudah in shul, so you have to do that now. But you have to put that together with this Ravid. Because if you go like the Gra, that you have to have bread, then how were you able to partake of the Kiddush in the shul? So you might say, you can't if you go like the Gra, and then you don't eat it at a Kiddush. but the minhag all of is to eat at a Kiddush, so you have to put together that gra with the Ravid that says there's no Isra of eating before Kiddush Shabbos day. So that's the discussion. It's also about the various minhagim of saying psukim before the Kiddush Shabbos day. Vishamru al kain beirach. Do you say a half a pasuk? You're allowed to say half a pasuk, kol psuka de lopaski Moshe nan lopaskinan, but we mentioned that poskim say, Rav Sternbach, that if you say it as a tefillah, not as a pasuk, so then maybe it would be okay. But others say maybe you shouldn't say psukim because people will think that's part of the real kiddush. Okay, one should follow their minhag. What about making kiddush on other substances other than wine? So we said wine's the best. Wine's the best to use for kiddush. What about bread? What about bread? So the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Kufav seems to say that you can make kiddush on bread. Right? Zimnin chaviva le rifta by Rav. Rav, sometimes he was in the mood for bread, so makadish rifta. He made kiddush on bread. Minai zimnin chaviva chamra makadish chamra. Rabbeinu Tam has a totally different understanding of that Gemara than most Rishonim. Rabbeinu Tam says you cannot make kiddush on bread. That Gemara was just talking about kiddush b'makom Seudah, having the bread there when you were making kiddush. But there's no kiddush on bread. But most Rishonim, including the Rambam, holds that one can make kiddush on bread. Right? And the Rambam says in Perach Chav Tzurba Hilchot Shabbos, I'm on page 31 now, if somebody's in the mood for bread more than wine, so then how is it notel yadav tchila? Wash the tila shadayim, and then stick in hamotzi lechem and aretz instead of bar pragafen in the kiddush, and one can be yotze that way. And the majority of Rishonim assume that you can make kiddush on bread. And the Rashi even says that this was an accepted practice. V'nagu ha'am l'kadesh alapas v'chenis kimu kol hagonim. But because Rabbeinu Tam says you can't, that's why the Ramah says one should only make kiddush on bread if there is no wine available. If there is no wine. V'im yayin ba'ir lo yekadesh alapas, says the Ramah in Reish Ayin Beis. The Bir Halacha quotes, the Mishmur quotes that if somebody really is in the mood for bread, then one could use it. But again, the Ramah says that one should make kiddush on wine. What happens if one washed before kiddush? Do you have to make kiddush on bread? That's what it sounds like from the Rambam. It sounds that way from the Rambam. And that's what it sounds the way from the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says, no. You can wash beforehand, and maybe even some people dafka wash beforehand. That's the minhag of yekis that we know today. You wash beforehand, and then you make kiddush on wine, and then one could have the hamotzi. Again, the Mishnah Berurah quotes that's not the minhag of most Ashkenazic families, where they first make kiddush, and then they do the tila shadayim after that. So that's in terms of bread. What about other drinks, what we called chamar medina? So we spoke about that in past shiurim as well. The Gemara seems to say that one could use chamar medina, but there are some amoraim and some tanoim that say not. Discussion in the Rishonim, when they say not, that means because it's not in the locale that it is chamar medina, that it's a drink of the land, or even if it is, you have to use wine. So it seems to be a machlokas amoraim, machlokas tanoim about beer, and the discussion of the Rishonim is, we have the Ritzgeis, you have the Rambam, maybe there's a difference between Kiddush by day and Kiddush by night. Why would there be a difference? Because Kiddush by day, you're not saying any Kiddush, as we said. Right, you're just saying the bracha. So if you just say hamotzi, then there's nothing nikar that's kiddush. So maybe Shabbos day is more of a problem to use bread than night, and that's the chiluk of the Rush. The Rush in the Arvei Psachim in source 31. But bokir yirash yivarech ala sheichar kodem berachas hamotzi. Dim lo kain batla kiddush shalayom. The rabbinan luhu mikra kamo kiddush halayla. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch praises the view of this Ramah. He likes this Ramah, and the Ramah says the minhag olam is like the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch says now in Reish Ayin Beis in source 32, b'makam she'ein yayin matzui, in a place where the wine is not so common. Yesh omer shemakashim ala sheicha v'shar maskim. Some say one could use chamar medina, other liquids, chutz ben hamayim, besides water. Water is not chamar medina, and anything that's used dafka for your thirst is not chamar medina, as we've said. It has to be something that you're machabed somebody with. The yesh omrim, some say you can't use beer. Ula harash, balayla lo yikadesh ala sheicher ala pas. At night, better to use bread than to use chamar medina. Uva boker yosef lakadesh ala sheichar shivarch alav shahakol instead of hamotzi, because if you make the bracha on hamotzi, ein kan shum shinui, and the Shulchan Aruch says unusual. The divrei tam heim, and it's divrei tam. It makes a lot of sense. So the Ramah says v'chein haminik pashut, like the Ramah. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes details about this. But again, where yayin is matsui, the whole Shulchan started off with where yayin is not matsui. Where wine is matsui, so that's definitely better kavod habracha to always use wine before chamar medina and before and before bread. The Mishnah Berurah does say if you really love a Chamar Medina, like schnapps or like beer, so then Mishnah Berurah says one can be Makadish on it during the day. But as we mentioned, if you use schnapps, you have to make sure you have the requisite shiur, as we've quoted in other shiurim, how much you have to make a kiddush on a revius and drink a rov revius, as we'll get back to. Bez Hashem. The Rav Avadia says that Sfaradim who follow the Shulchan Aruch should not make kiddush on other drinks, as I said, im ein yayin matsui. But if there's yayin matsui, you should definitely use wine, says Rav Avadia. If one does not have wine or bread for the nighttime kiddush, so the Shmir Shabbos says you should never say kiddush. Say kiddush, maybe use some baked goods, pasa babakistan. If you have nothing, just find something. You don't have to fast. Diluted wine. We're not going to review so many of these details because it's not so lamaisa, but we spoke about the different measures of diluting in the days of the Gemara. How much when's it considered wine? When do you still say beri paragaf? And when does it convert to shahakol? So we saw the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch, but again, generally we get our wines prepared now, and we're not doing any dilution. But related to that is the grape juice discussion. The grape juice discussion starts on page 42. Can grape juice, where there was chemical processes to prevent fermenting, and it removes basically the alcoholic content. So is that an issue? Is that anything negative about that? So the Gemara says in Baba Basra Tzadi Zayin, Rava says you could take grapes, squeeze them, and use that. So there's no alcoholic content there. Rava says, so why is grape juice different? Because grape juice, you did something to prevent. Here, you just squeezed out the grapes, and now you're going to drink it. You didn't remove any power. But when you remove the power, would that change anything? So they quote B'Shem Rav Elyashiv, yes. They quote B'Shem Rav Elyashiv in the Tshuvas Shvus Yitzchak. Rav Yitzchak Derzi quotes Rav Elyashiv that the bracha of beri paragafen cannot be said over grape juice, which has been chemically prevented from fermentation. Right, and that's the Rav Elyashiv. But he is a das yachid. All the other poskim say there's no problem with making beri paragafen and grape juice, and no problem with making kiddush on grape juice either. Just parenthetically, B'Shem Rav Moshe, they quote that on Pesach at the Seder, you need wine with an alcoholic content. A little bit. You could dilute grape juice, you can mix wine and grape juice. Even Rav Moshe would say that's okay. Not everybody realizes that. You have any type of alcoholic content, it's okay for Moshe, even that's by the Seder. Based on a Yerushalmi, but that is the halacha. But generally, most assume that grape juice is fine, and as long as it still tastes like wine. What about white wine? So there is a Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra, also Tzadi Zayin. The Gemara there says that white wine is a problem, right? Based on the pasuk in Tehillim, Al Tira Yain Ki Yisadam. So what's it a problem for? It's the Ramban there in Baba Basra, Tzadi Zayin. It's a problem for Kiddush. The Ramban says you can't use white wine for Kiddush. Kiddush be'inyan adom. You need red, says the Ramban. But that's not how we generally assume. The Rashbam there quotes that Deya and doesn't agree with it. He says that Gemara is only talking about Nisuch Hayayin, pouring wine on the Mizbeach. That requires red. But Kiddush has less standards, and Kiddush one could use even white wine, and that is the Shulchan Aruch quotes both Deyas, but the Shulchan Aruch quotes in source number 52, Mekachin al Yayin Lavan, V'Ramban postlo l'Kiddush afilu b'di'evet, aval mavdilan alav, Kiddush on wine, the Ramban says only Avdallah, V'aminag la'olam kisvara rishona. And the middle looks like the first one, especially if one likes white wine better, no problem with using it. Where they're totally equals, then we want to be Yechoshesh for the Ramban, then Yechoshesh for the Ramban. But otherwise, it is totally okay. So that is all shiur number 1 relating to halachas of Kiddush. We continue with the next source, the next shiur. Also Kiddush. Halachas of Kiddush number 3. This is on page 61. The Isser of eating before Kiddush. We mentioned this when we spoke about Kiddush Rabbah, but the Gemara says in Psachim Daf Kuvav, in source number 1, Amar Rav Huna Marav, Ta'am Eino Makadesh. If somebody tasted food already, then he can't make Kiddush. Have somebody else make Kiddush for him. And Shmuel says, Ta'am Makadesh, and that's what we hold. Even if he was told he has to make Kiddush. What is this based on? There's a Maram Chalava there in the Arib Psachim that says it's a knas if you ate, because it's nira that you're mevazeh the mitzvah. If you ate and then you're going to make Kiddush, so if you ate, let somebody else make Kiddush. So it's less bizayon in that way. But we assume that there's an Isser. The Rambam's Lashon is Asr Ladam Lechol Olishtos Yayin. you can't drink wine before Kiddush. But the Shulchan Aruch does not say that. The Shulchan Aruch quotes, Asr litom klum, kodem sheyakadesh, it's asr to taste anything before Kiddush, and that is what we assume. As we said, we assume this lachatchila even for the daytime Kiddush. Even for the daytime Kiddush. The Magen Avraham says if you need to rinse your mouth out for something, nearly to shari lirchot's piv, because you're not trying to swallow. But really, tasting and swallowing anything would be a problem. If there's medicine that one needs to take, so then one could take a pill. You could swallow what the Shmir Shabbos says in that case. Again, if somebody is in a difficult situation, then obviously this is lechatchila. But lechatchila, we're supposed to try to not partake of anything at night and also during the day as well. What about standing or sitting for Kiddush? So we mentioned it's fascinating that this is not 100% clear at all in the Gemara. Something that we do all the time. No idea. Sitting or standing. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes in Hilchos, in Archaim Reshut Gimel, in Hilchos Brachos, if somebody wants to be motzi someone else in a bracha, there's better to have a kfius, better to be a group. And you're a group more when you are sitting down. And in the olden days, lying down, heseba, but even now, sitting down to create a connection between the people involved. So for Kiddush, if somebody's going to be motzi somebody in Kiddush l'chora, it's better to sit. The Tosfos is bad. The Tosfos says, why by Avdallah do we stand? V'tzorachi and Tosfos and Brachas Mem Gimel. Ksas hami Avdallah shanim avdilin va'omdin. Heichanu potim says, how can we be motzi each other with Avdallah? Right? Ein she'inanu lo yoshvin. We don't sit. V'lo mesubin. We don't lean. Right? Why is that? So he says, Shema mitoch shekoven atzmam kedei latzes. We focus on each other. So maybe that's why it works. But Tosfos says, lakach no'ev v'tov l'mavdil v'gam l'shomim sheyeshu b'shas Avdallah. Better to sit because then there's a real kfiyas. So it seems like for Kiddush as well, the same svara would apply. The Kolbo, other Rishon, says no, it's better to stand for Havdalah for Kavod HaMelech. Nachon lahavdil me'uman lekavod HaMelech. Right, melave the malka. Shana melave also v'derech levayim me'uman. Kiddush, what about Kiddush? Welcoming the malka. Shehu kemoshanu yotzim lekrasa melach hayalan lomer me'umad. So maybe Kiddush too, but because Kiddush is b'makam Seudah, says the Kolbo, you should sit. So maybe the svara would apply, but I mean malava the malka in, but that's the Kolbo. The Rambam, interestingly, nowhere in Hilchos Shabbos does he say a word, but it's just in Hilchos Sukkah. The Rambam says you have to make a lay shave before you sit down in the Sukkah. So that's the Rambam in Hilchos Sukkah that says on Sukkahs the minhag is to stand for Kiddush. So you can make the lay shave before you sit. Mashra from the Rambam that the rest of the year you sit for Kiddush. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes all three opinions. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, there's the minhag of sitting for the whole Kiddush. There's a minhag of standing for the whole Kiddush. Where does that come from? Either malave, as we said, or some say, b'shem the Arizal, you're going to stand for the first half of the Kiddush because it's edus, vayachulu, so then you stand for the second half. And there are those that sit and stand and sit. Stand for the first half and sit for the second half. Whatever one does, one is okay, because all the shitas are quoted in the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph. That is all generally by the nighttime Kiddush. By the daytime Kiddush, it seems like one should sit, right? Because there's no eidos in the first half, and you're not being malave the malka in, so one should probably sit, if possible, for the daytime Kiddush, if it is possible. The Pnini Halacha also summarizes the different customs, Rav Malamed, and we mentioned there's different customs in terms of we mentioned the morning Kiddush where to start from. What about the Friday night Kiddush also? Vayer ve'yavoker, Yom HaShishi. Starting with Yom HaShishi, right? The Ramah says start with Yom HaShishi because that's Yud Kei Vavke. Yom HaShishi ve'chul Shemayim, but it doesn't make any sense. Yom HaShishi is the end of the previous phrase. So some start with Vayer ve'yavoker. So that makes the phrase good, but it's also the middle of a pasuk. So some start with Vayar Lakim as Kol Asher Asavi Nitum Od Vayar Vevoker. Some say you can say that quietly and start with Yom HaShishi out loud, and then you can be Yotzei the Ramah of having Shem Hashem out loud and still saying a whole pasuk. Good. Covering the challah during Kiddush. So this was a 3 days in the Rishonim. We saw on page 68, 69, 3 days. The Tosfos quotes, and the Rashbam quotes the She'iltos. The She'iltos says, you cover the challah, it's as if the challahs aren't there. So you declare this as a Shabbos meal, right? L'kavet Shabbos, you make Kiddush, and then you uncover, then you say, so everything after that declaration is l'kavet Shabbos. One reason to cover the challah. A second reason is zecher to the man. Right? Tosfos quotes zecher to the man. The man was covered on top and on bottom. And of course, the most famous reason that is quoted, the Yerushalmi, that we cover the challah so that the challah is not embarrassed, so to speak. Because in Hilchos Brachas, you should make hamotzi before Kiddush, before B'rei Pri, but we don't because of the mitzvah, so ki'ilu, the challah is embarrassed, so we cover, and we mentioned the story of the Achronim, that you got to make sure you don't embarrass people, more important than embarrassing the challah. So there are many nafkaminas, so we try to be makbar for both of them. What if you're making Kiddush on bread? So there's no embarrassment, you're not making a B'rei Pri, but zecher to the man should still be covered. And maybe zecher to the l'kavet Shabbos, right? What happens if one cover the chalas, when can one uncover the chalas? So the Mishnah Berurah discusses that. So if it's zecher to the embarrassment, that right after you make Kiddush, you should be able to uncover it. And also, maybe right where it's covered. You already announced the meal of Shabbos, so you can take the cover off. If it's zecher to the man, some say maybe you should keep the cover on through hamotzi. Through hamotzi, you keep the cover on. What about if you have to cover everything else on the table, right? The pickles and the coleslaw, maybe just mizonos. So again, if it's l'kavet Shabbos, maybe everything should be covered, and the Rav Soloveitchik was makbid for that, and not to bring anything else to the table until after Kiddush. But if it's just zecher to the man, then maybe it's just the Lechem Mishnah, which is the zecher to the man. And what about shalosh shudis, where you're not making Kiddush? What about a challah board dafka underneath? So other nafkaminas as well. Another halacha about Kiddush is how much to drink and how do you divvy out the wine. So we know the Gemara tells us in Psachim on Daf Kuf Zayin that the Makadesh has to be to'em, has to taste a male lugmav, a cheekful. How much is a cheekful? So the Ma'askil we paskin, that's a rov revius. One has to make Kiddush on a revius of wine and drink a rov revius. Tosfos in Yuma Daf Pei says because that's Yisuve Daita. That gives settles the mind, so to speak, and therefore that's the shiur. If one didn't drink that amount, so then what's the halacha? So if the wine spilled out, the Beis Yosef discusses. Im nishbach hakos, I'm about to drink and it spills out. Are you yotzei Kiddush? So Maker did he seem to say you're yotzei. When it says if you didn't taste any, you're not yotzei, that's where it means you weren't yotzei ketikuna. You weren't yotzei perfectly and ultimately, but you were yotzei. You were yotzei, like the Rabbi Gamliel. Kol shelo amar gimel devarim lo yosei dechavasa. The Magen Avram thinks that maybe the Beis Yosef was choser bo because he seems to be soser himself. But we saw the Chuvas Arlet Sion, who does not think that there was any stira, and the Beis Yosef, the Rabbi Yosef Karo holds, if it spilled out, you were yotzei. But let's say the regular case. I have Kiddush, so who drinks? So l'chadchila, the Gaonim say that the Makadesh has to drink a rov revius. That's what the Torah quotes from the Gaonim. Shalo yatsa ela imkein tam Makadesh. The Makadesh has to drink a rov revius. What happens though if you have an elderly grandfather? You ought to be machabed him to be Makadesh. So you can't, according to the Gaonim, you can't. But there's other shitas, right? The Torah quotes his father, the Rosh, that says, no, as long as any other person, one other person at the meal has to drink a rov revius, that is second shita. That's second shita. The Ritva in Erevin, Daf Ayin Tes, has a third shita. As long as everybody together, B'tzirav, drinks a rov revius, so then that is good enough. All these three shitas are quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, and l'chadchila, one should try to be out to the Gaonim, or the second level, somebody, and if need be, given the example, by somebody has to make Kiddush on schnapps, and that's the only thing that you have to use a whole cup to make sure you have the shiur, but it's hard to drink, impossible to drink so much, so you give it out and rely on that shita of the Ritva in Meseches Erevin. Meseches Erevin, again, the Shulchan Aruch quotes all of the opinions. Good. The Shmir Shabbos quotes what happens if one is unable to drink, could use a katan. So he talks about that as well. A katan might be able to drink. What about the idea of pagum? We know one, l'chadchila, should make Kiddush on non-pagum wine. Pagum means wine that somebody drunk from. One that somebody drunk from. So if I have wine that somebody drunk from, let's say I come to a Kiddush and I'm going to use half a cup somebody drunk from, if I pour more in, that makes it unpagum. That's the halacha in Hilchos Pegimas Hayayin. Whatever you pour from that, you go by that, and it's no longer pagum. But that's the Gemara Psachim, Daf Kuf Hey Kuvav, in source number 35. So I'm not supposed to make Kiddush on a pagum cup, Pagum cup. So what do I do? So says the Rush in Brachas, source number 36. You don't have to pour from your Kiddush cup into everybody else's cup. Right, as long as they have some wine in their cup that wasn't drunk from, that's already not Pagum. That's okay. If they were Pagum, then you got to pour a little bit in. Pour a little bit in, so they're drinking from non-Pagum wine. The Ra thinks that only the cup used for Kiddush, right? They could drink they could drink Pagum wine, tainted, drank from wine. But the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Yeshita of the Rush, right? Which was supposed to drink from non-Pagum wine. So how do you give out the non-Pagum wine? So there were a couple of options. So either I could pour into little cups before I drink from my cup. That's one way to do it. Or everybody else has a little bit of wine. Number 2. 3, the Sharatzian quotes that if somebody ever, you can only do this, let's say if you only have your family, if you drink from the cup itself that one made Kiddush on, that also is Chashav Kimakadesh Gufa, and therefore there's no issue of Pagum in that regard. Okay. Kiddush b'makam Seudah. So this Kiddush b'makam Seudah we mentioned when we did the shiurim has to do with the when, the what, and the where. The when, the what, and the where. There's a machlokes, Rav and Shmuel discussing Kiddush b'makam Seudah. Kiddush and Shul, was that makam Seudah? But we paskin that ein Kiddush ela b'makam Seudah. Why? So the Rashbam there has 2 lumdish deos, psachim kuf aleph, whether it's a din in Kiddush or a din in the Seudah, whether one has to ground the Kiddush in order to make it anchored in the meal, or does one have to be machabed their meal by making Kiddush beforehand? So that's a din in the Kiddush or a din in the Seudah. So that is 2 days in the Rashbam. He has it on Daf Kuf Aleph. So what's the definition of Seudah? The what? What's the definition of Seudah? So the Gaonim quote, Mizonos, anything. The Torah quotes Siman Reisha and Gimel, Kasva Gaonim, Hadamina in Kiddush Alakam Seudah, Ein Zorach Sheyigmar Sham Kol Seudaso. You have to eat the whole meal. Ela Filu Achal Davar Muat. Oshasa Kos Yayin, even wine. Shechayev Ala Bracha, that means a lot of wine. A chayev that you have to make a bracha afterwards. Yasi De Kiddush, Yasi De Kiddush. So it seems like even something that's not bread. Tosfos sounds like it's against that. Tosfos sounds like it's bread. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Gaonim. The Bir Halacha quotes the Gra. The Gra says, I don't think so. I think you have to use bread. So machlokas haposkim, whether one could use mizonos. One should not use anything less than mizonos. One should not use peiros. One should not use vegetables. Potato kugel, that's not mizonos, right? Cholent is mizonos, that has barley in it, and cookies and cake, that's mizonos. If one has a lot of wine, you want to be shosa yayin, so that is the Mishnah Berurah says that ein lo hakel, you only ein lo hakel al b'makam atzchak to use the wine, but generally one could use minhag olam is to use mizonos like the gaonim and not like the gra. Good. The time, right? The proximity of time. The time. We spoke about the what, now we talk about the when. So one should try to make Kiddush in proximity of Seudah. If one takes a big break after the Kiddush, before the Seudah, that is a problem. But the Ramah says in Reisha and Gimel, source 49, if you had in mind to leave and then you didn't leave, that's a problem, because you have to have the das of Kiddush b'makam Seudah during the Kiddush. Shalom Ma'isa, the Mishnah Berurah, the Shmir Shabbos, try to do Netilas Yadayim soon after. V'lo yafsik afilu lizman katzar. So that's the when. And what about the where? So it should be in the same place. What if it's not in the same place? What if you have das? What if you have das to be somewhere else? So we said it's a machlokes about whether there's a machlokes between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. So that was a machlokes between Rabbeinu Nisim and the Rush and the Ran. You have it there on page 86, 87. L'maisa, we paskin that one can have das to move. Can one have das to move even to a different building or only within the same building? So that was a machlokes. That was a discussion. And the Shulchan Aruch is mekel. Shulchan Aruch quotes both views. The Ramah is mekel based on the chilik of Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon, that if you have in mind, you can even be go somewhere else in a different place. Sometimes this is very lamaisa. If you wait, the rabbi wants to make Kiddush in the sanctuary before everybody goes because they're going to miss Kiddush. It's a tzarech. So you have in mind. Even if you can't see, that's another level of being better in terms of connection. You could see where the Kiddush is going to be. But if it's in a basement, if you have das, so we're mako regarding that. Rav Yitzchak Yosef says, if you could see the place and has das, so then you could go from house to house, for sure, even house to house, without any hesitation. But again, if this is only lechumra, if we need to, so we could rely on that. So that's in terms of inyanim of Kiddush. The third shiur that we'll talk about is Oneg Shabbos and the 3 meals on Shabbos. Right? 3 meals on Shabbos. So the Rambam tells us at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos Perek Lamid, Arba Dvarim Nemru B'Shabbos. We're on page 105 now. 4 things are said about Shabbos. Shnaim and Torah, Shnaim and Seforim, 2 Daraisa, 2 D'Rabbanan, explained by the Nevi'im. Shebet Torah, Zachar v'Shamar. Zachar and Shamar the Daraisa, and the Nevi'im, Midrabanan, Kavod and Oneg. Based on the pasuk in Yeshayahu, Perek Nuances, we said Nuances, Menucha. You remember where all the halachas are from. Remember the Vilna Gaon we spoke about in the earlier shiurim. Kavod and Oneg. Kavod is everything you do before Shabbos. Oneg is everything you do on Shabbos. Halakas Neiris, if you remember, with both. You light it before Shabbos, that's kavod, and you enjoy them on Shabbos, that's Oneg. So again, that's kavod and Oneg. What's Oneg Shabbos? So the Gemara says in Shabbos, Kuf Yud Ches Amid Beis, and source number 3 by Mema Angos, the Gemara says, different types of delicacies and foods, fish, dagim gedolim, tafshel shal tradin, right? Even something small, if it's something enjoyable, anything you enjoy, that's Oneg Shabbos. Good. What's the minimum? What does one have to have? So the Gemara tells us Shabbos Kuf Yizayin 3 meals. Kama Seudah Chayv Adam Lechol b'Shabbos 3. Rabbi Chidka holds 3 during the day, plus the 1 at night 4. So Chidka says based on the 3 hayoms in the pasuk in Bishalach, so it's 3, either 3 plus 1 or just 3. Most assume that this is not a drasha gemura, but an asmachta. The Yereim, Rabbi Elazar Metz, one of the Rishonim, a Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam, holds no daraisa. Tziva yotzreinu sheyochlu b'nei Yisrael gimus Seudas b'Shabbos. It's a daraisa. It's a daraisa, says the Yereim, but we don't assume that way. We assume it's D'Rabbanan. The Aruch HaShulchan says even if it's D'Rabbanan, it goes back a long way. B'kamakom vadai mitakanas Moshe Rabbeinu heim. Goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Shekein Kibel Misinai is connected to the 3 avos, connected to the Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim. But we assume it's D'Rabbanan, like the Kolbo says. When does one have to eat it? So l'chadchila, the Rambam says 3 meals b'Shabbos, 1 at night, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. Right, so we should try to have 3 meals, all at the different times of Shabbos. Times of Shabbos. What about Kiddush? So there's Kiddush by the first 2 meals. Pashtus, there's no Kiddush by the 3rd meal. By Shalosh Shudas, there's no Kiddush. There's a Rambam. The Rambam says that one should be Kovea Seudah al Hayayin, which the Tur seems to understand as Kiddush, because he quotes the Rush. He quotes the Rambam, then he says, but my father says don't make Kiddush Shalosh Shudas. Sounds like he understands the Rambam as making Kiddush Shalosh Shudas, but we don't assume that way. The Kesef Mishnah points out that we don't assume that way, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch quotes, one does not make Kiddush, one does not need to make Kiddush Shalosh Shudas. Even the Mishnah Berurah says you should have wine to be Yosei the Shita of the Rambam. When are these meals eaten? The 3 meals, so 1 at night, 1 in the morning, 1 at night, 1 in the afternoon. Tosfos sounds like if you miss 1 at night, you could eat 3 during the day. That's what Tosfos says in Psachim Daf Kuf Aleph. The Aruch HaShulchan is a very strong believer. 3 different time periods: 1 at night, 1 in the morning, and 1 in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon. And the 1 in the morning is not only because you can't fast on Shabbos, but because that's the time for the morning meal. The Aruch HaShulchan is strong about that. There's 3 times frames of Shabbos. And this is L'Shita, so we mentioned that the Aruch HaShulchan says when you have Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos, there's no chiyuv to eat Shalosh Shudas. Because the Aruch HaShulchan also believes you have to have bread, as we're going to see, and you can't have bread, you can't have matzah, you can't have challah, Pesach afternoon, and you have to have Shalosh Shudas in the afternoon. So that's why he says there's no chiyuv. Just like there's no chiyuv of Shalosh Shudas on Yom Kippur Shachal Yis B'Shabbos. So too on Erev Pesach Shachal Yis B'Shabbos. Unbelievable. We don't assume that way. We assume you just do 2 in the morning. The 2 in the morning, early in the morning, and then you can be out to the afternoon one with the B'diavad Shitas in that impossible situation. So again, that's what we assume. We try to have the 2nd meal. The Orlat Zion says, have it before Chatzos. But again, it's less urgent. As long as you don't fast half the day, take a cup of water before you go to davening. There's not a problem. Not a problem. The chiyuv of bread. So we paskin by the first two meals. There's no shayla. The Shulchan Aruch says Reish Ayin Daled the Seudah zu v'shal shachris efshar la'asos below pas efshar. The Shulchan Aruch says Zohir l'kayim Seudah shlishis also. Also, how much? So the Shulchan, the Magen Avraham says a little more than a beitza, but Mishnah Berurah says kizayis. Kizayis one can have. What about if somebody is allergic to gluten-free? So we spoke then about if one is mazik from the food, then you have to force yourself to have it. One does not eat it. But oat flour, if one has pure oat flour, then there's no gluten in there and it'll be okay. The problem is there's often contamination with other grains that contain gluten. So one tries to get to find the option if they could get special wheat flour from which the gluten has been removed. That would be amazing for the celiac patients who could have challah loaves, whose bracha is amotzi, without gluten on Shabbos. There is an issue to fast on Shabbos, right? The Rambam quotes this in Hilchot Shabbos, Asur lisanos v'lizok l'schanein. It relates to asking for rachmanis and feeling that something is missing on Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of enjoyment, but one can't fast. One can't even fast a half a day. The Yerushalmi in the beginning of the third paragraph of Tainus until Sheishos. Even one's learning and davening. Right, the Shulchan Aruch says even one is learning and davening, one is not supposed to fast. Also, l'sanos b'Shabbos at Sheishos, the Shulchan Aruch says Rama afilu lo meidum mispal aser. If you know you're going to a late minyan with a long chazan, a long davening, take a drink of water in the morning. Take a drink of water. Take a cup of coffee. That would be mutter. If I have in mind to fast, the Mishnah Berurah says even for an hour is aser. There's no fasting on Shabbos. The only time this fasting is mutter is Tainas Chalom. Tainas Chalom is, the Shulchan Aruch says is mutter, because that's a tzara right there. It's a real tzarech. But generally, we shy away from fasting. Lechem Mishnah. We spoke about the three meals. Lechem Mishnah. The Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara says, Shabbos Kuf Yud Zayin. Also in Brachas, Lametes around, that on Shabbos, Chayav Adam Lifso al Shtei Kikaros. Dichsiv Lechem Mishnah. And then it says, Rav Ashi says, I saw Rav Kahana that it used to hold two challahs and cut one of them. And then Rabbi Zera used to batza akula sherusa. What does that mean? Batza akula sherusa. So Rashi says it means he cut big pieces. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch quotes. The Shulchan Aruch quotes in source 31, you cut big slices so people can be satisfied. But if you look in the Rashba is a different shot. Batza akula sherusa. Based on the context, he says, no, it's referring back to the previous line. Rabbi Zera held two challahs and Rabbi Ashi held two challahs and cut one. Rabbi Zera cut both challahs. Batza akula sherusa, every challah that he cut both of them. Al Skavat Shabbos, he cut both of them. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes that the Marshal and the Gra, and the Marshal and the Shlo were Noeg to do like the Rashba to cut both challahs. The Gra said that this Rashba helps us out because the Arizal quotes he should have 12 challahs on Shabbos, and the Shulchan Aruch said, the Gemara says he should have 2 challahs. But how could there be a stira? The Gra said, the Arizal says there's never a stira. The Gra says there's never a stira between the Nigla and the Nistar. So what do you do here? Is it 12? Is it 2? So says the Gra, unbelievable. The Arizal says you have to have 12. What does 12 mean? It's not 12 challahs per meal. Some have that understanding. But the Gemara says, it said Yud Beis with a ches, with a little line, with a smidgik. Yud Beis chatza'in or chatichos, meaning if you cut both challahs, you have 2 challahs at every meal, you cut both, so that's 4 at every meal, 4, 8, 12. So really it means the Arizal is going like the Rashba. You have 12 halves after you cut all the challahs at the meal. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah says, maybe the Shulchan Aruch does not quote like this Rashba. You don't have to cut both. But some have the minhag, so you could have one big challah and one pita at every meal, and you could cut both and be yotze the shita of the Rashba. There is al pi Kabbalah to cut the bottom challah on Friday night. Friday night cut the bottom challah, all other times cut the top challah. The Ramah says al pi Kabbalah. But if you cut the bottom challah, the Bach says it's a problem. Ein mavir ala mitzvahs. The Bach in source 34, page 120. How can he be mavir on the mitzvahs, right? You have the knife and you're gonna put the top challah away. So the Taz says no problem. To answer his father-in-law's kasha, bring the bottom challah a little closer to you. So you bring the bottom challah a little closer to you, so there's no problem of ein mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. I don't know if we mentioned then, but there's also the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Medaktakim, maybe to mark the challah that you're going to cut also because of Hilchos Brachas. You don't want to have a hefsek. You're going to make the bracha lemotzi, then have to cut it. But if you mark it, it's as if you started cutting it already, and therefore you don't want to go all the way in because then you won't have a shalem. So if you mark it, so then that would be good enough. Okay. Other halachas of Lechem Mishnah, the Or Latzion or B'Zin Abishol talks about you could use a frozen challah. Could use a frozen challah. The Shmir Shabbos quotes Rosh Hashanah. He's not so into that. If it's so hard, if it's not edible now, even if it's gonna be defrost. So there's different deos. What if one doesn't have any challah? Could use pasaba b'kisnin. Okay, that's the best thing you need to do. It should be whole. As long as it looks whole. Sometimes you'll get a bakery challah or any challah that was touching another one, and when you separated them, then they kind of like took a piece off a little bit from the other one, neshicha. So you do the best you can as long as it looks. Right, the Piskei Teshuvos quotes, Ule'ene b'nei adam nirev nikra shalem. That's good enough. That's good enough. What happens if you don't have whole ones? So you can take two slices. What if you have one? Is it better to cut it in half and then make hamotzi on the two halves? So the Nitziv has a tshuva, the Meshav Davar, and Simon Chafalev, he says no. He says, however, it's bala fanecha. If it came to you as two slices, so then you could use that, 2 slices of challah. If it came to you as a whole one, then just keep it as a whole one. Besides the Lechem Mishnah, obviously, there's an idea to have special food on Shabbos and Yantif. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shabbos, now on page 125, Tzarech lesakein tavshil shamein biyoser umashke mevusam. Right, enjoyable food that one likes to have. Remember, Yosef Moker Shabbos, Hashem took care of him and got him that fish with the pearl inside. Special din. One should try to make many brachas, right? We usually have a mitzvah to make a mitzvah d'Rabbanan to make 100 brachas on Shabbos. The Gemara Menachos Mem Gimel. So on Shabbos you gotta figure out, because we're down a lot of brachas because there's 7 instead of 19 for each of the amidos. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes Yarbe bepeirus u'megadim. Right, have snacks. Kedusha lahashlim, not because neshama yasera lahashlim minyan meya brachas. Right, to be mashlim the minyan. You have a lot more. You can have a lot of snacks. The halacha is, the Gemara says in Psachim, kavod yom is kodem l'kavod laila. So the day meal should be even more special than the night meal. But why is it that many people have the nighttime meal, different food? So the Aruch HaShulchan says sometimes things taste better out of the oven, so you can't have that during the day. But that's part of the idea of chalent, to have it the next day. The Mishnah Berurah quotes the Marshal. He says, I don't know why people are makbid about this. He says, from the time that I was mayor on this, I stopped having fish Friday night. Must be that he liked fish, so he didn't have fish Friday night. He only had a Shabbos day. And I mentioned this is the Marshal Shitasa, who didn't eat fish on Rosh Hashanah because he felt it's Yom Adin. So it's the same Marshal. But the Aruch HaShulchan says, you do your best. Why is the daytime more chaviv? So he quotes that night maybe you're not as hungry, or maybe bisman hamikdash, most things happen during the day. So our avodah on Shabbos also during the day is a key. There is other oneg. There's other oneg on Shabbos. Special learning. The Meiri says, special learning on Shabbos. He quotes the Yerushalmi. How are you ma'aneg Shabbos? So there's a stira. Some say Talmud Torah, some say eating. So the Yerushalmi says, kan b'talmud tachan, kan balabas. So says the Meiri, even though you might have thought, and this is quoted in the Ramah, even though you might have thought that, what does it mean? Kan b'talmud chacham, a talmud chacham should sit and learn on Shabbos. That's his oneg. And a balabas should eat and drink. That's his oneg. It should be the opposite. The Meiri quotes that a talmud chacham who learned the whole week, he could physically enjoy himself a little more on Shabbos. The balabas who wasn't as into the learning the whole week, he should spend more time learning on Shabbos. So there's special din, and the Ramah quotes that idea of the Meiri and the Yerushalmi in Reish Sadi Beis, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes in Reish Sadik that one should try to be mechadesh on Shabbos. The Shari Tshuva quotes that our neshama yisera goes back after Shabbos. Hashem says, "No, well, you mechadesh." So either mechadesh something or learn something new on Shabbos. We should try to do what we can to be marbe in that oneg, the spiritual oneg for our neshama. For our neshama yisera. If you enjoy sleeping, taking a nap, you can sleep. The Ramah says in Reish Sadi, in source 58, if somebody enjoys a shena sarayim, al yivatlanu ki oneg hilo, it is in oneg. Fine. Shalosh Seudah, Seudah Shlishis. So the first is we mentioned, why is it called Shalosh Seudos? Shalosh Seudah is like Shalosh Seudos, 3 meals. So Achronim say, because the first 2 meals aren't Nikar, that's L'Shem Shabbos. Right? You're eating because you're hungry. The third meal is Megala on all 3 meals, that the first 2 meals were also L'Kavat Shabbos. That's why it's called Shalosh Seudos, because a lot of the time we're not hungry to eat Shalosh Seudah. But we're not eating it for ourselves. We're eating it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to show that this day is a special. So when do you have it? You have it mincha time, late in the day. Mishesh shows v'mechzu lamala, late in the day. You have it between mincha and ma'ariv. Rabbeinu Tam says it's usher to have it then, because that's when the neshamas are going back to Gehenna after the respite on Shabbos. We don't pass them like Rabbeinu Tam. We pass them that the best time to have Shalosh Seudah is late on Shabbos day between mincha and ma'ariv. Tovla, Mishnah Berurah quotes Tovla hadil avarech ala yayin tochasuda. It's good to have wine. That's based on that Rambam that we mentioned earlier. Women have to eat Shalosh Seudah. Women and men have the same exact obligation as we have mentioned. What do you have to have? So here the Rishonim have different days. Bread. The Ran quotes maybe some have mizonos, maybe some have fish and chicken, some have meat. The Shulchan Aruch quotes all 4 opinions, but says clearly, Visvara Rishona Iker Shetzarach Lasosa Bepas. You have to have bread. That's the Iker. Elokate if he's Savea Biyoser, which we say, so just don't be Savea Biyoser. You have to think earlier, and all you have to have is 1 kazayas of challah. Just think earlier and don't become Savea Biyoser. The Shulchan Aruch here does not quote the 5th day of learning instead of Shalosh Seudah. That's not found in Hilchos Shabbos. The only place that's found is in a Zohar. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is quoted in Hilchos Pesach, by Erev Pesach Shechalias B'Shabbos, and we noted then. So that's in the impossible situation, like we mentioned before, when he's supposed to have Shalosh Seudah. So number 1, it's not quoted in Hilchos Shabbos. Number 2, it's only in the impossible situation. Number 3, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai didn't do half the mitzvahs because Tarasu Naso. So he didn't eat Shalosh Seudah either, but that's not what we should rely on at all. The Aruch HaShulchan says, Asa litin asadin, those who don't take Shalosh Seudah seriously and don't eat bread. So we need to eat bread for Shalosh Seudah, even if it's we're not so hungry, and just have a little bit of bread. And we mentioned Malava Malka, right after Shabbos, all of a sudden we have a big appetite. It's a lot of it's in our head. We could have 1 piece of challah for Shalosh Seudah. Good. This takes us through the mitzvahs aseh up until Havdalah. So by Hashem, next year we will get into Havdalah 1, Havdalah 2, introduction to Melech HaShabbos, and the beginning of Bishul. Again, today's shiur was sponsored by Lauren and Michael Mandelstam and family in honor of their brothers, Rabbi Rafi Mandelstam, Rabbi Yoni Mandelstam, for all the Torah they teach to all their Talmidim in TABC and the Teaneck and Fairlawn communities, and in my honor for spreading Torah. May our learning be a schus for our chayalim and for all of Klal Yisrael. Enjoy. Have a great week.